Hi class, I'm going to go over chapter 13 really quick for you. The majority of this chapter is this is what it does, this is what it does. So it's mostly just memorization. There's a lot of anatomy in this chapter, and I don't think you're to the brain yet in lab, but you will probably have a chance to dissect a brain, and you'll definitely have a chance to get more familiar with brain anatomy by looking at the brain models, and that will help a lot with learning the actual functions, whether or not that matches up with lecture. It might not. You have to know it one way or the other. So you could always go in during open labs to kind of work ahead for lab and participate that way. There's also our Connect Plus website, which has a lot of great practices on there. Understanding where things are in the brain will also help you understand what those things do and their function. In other words, the things that are lower down on the brain stem area, we call that, those are the more rudimentary basic functions, heart rate, respiration, and the things that are more towards the top are the more complex, more human-like functions. So it's kind of this ascending and descending pathways as different neurons bring information in and out of the brain. So there's a little bit of development in the very beginning of this chapter. I do think the development piece is important. Understanding how the brain develops, again, helps you understand what parts of the brain are similar and how they relay information to each other at the higher levels of nervous system function. Eventually you get into, in this chapter, some of the more complex physiology. There's not a lot of physiology in this chapter. The majority of it, as I said, is anatomy. But you do get to the cerebrospinal fluid and how it's made, where it's reabsorbed, and its circulation pattern. So that's one thing that you might want to diagram out in a flow chart or make some note cards and kind of mix them up and see if you can put them in order. And that's for you on page 446 in your textbook. Great diagram there. Really shows the choroid plexus in good detail, so you can see how that blood-brain barrier works and how the CSF is very much separate from the rest of the circulation. It goes in to talk about the blood supply to the brain, and then we get to the cranial nerves. Now the cranial nerves are the specific paired nerves that come off of the brain. All of the other nerves in our body are the spinal nerves, which we covered in the last chapter. So these cranial nerves all have a specific function, and those functions are either related to motor coordinations or they are sensory, or they're both. And some of those motor coordinations are somatic and some of them are sympathetic or parasympathetic. So it's important to understand which nerves are associated with which functionality. So that you will see starting on page 448. You see the origination and where those nerves are on that brain diagram on page 449. I'm not going to give you a picture of the brain and have you label. You may be asked to do that in lab, however. The charts on the next couple of pages go through exactly what these nerves do. So what do you need to know? You need to know the number, cranial nerve number 1, cranial nerve number 2. You need to know the name. So cranial nerve number 1 is olfactory, cranial nerve number 2 is optic, ocular motor is number 3, etc. So it's important for you to know the numbers with the names. It's also important for you to know the function, what it does. Is it a sensory nerve? Is it a motor nerve? Those are the types of things that you need to know. There's an awful lot of information in this chart, like where it moves and which foramen it goes through and blah blah blah. You don't need to know all of that. You may need to know for lab, but not for lecture. I'm not going to test you on those things. That is pretty much the chapter. That's all of chapter 13, and it ends with a little bit of disorders, as it usually does. So please let me know if you have any questions, and keep up the hard work. See ya.